one of my favorite guests of all time because he's such a gentleman. His culture of giving back to the country is it's at the highest level. Mr. Steve Forbes is standing by, American business leader, twice a candidate for the highest office in our country for President of the United States. He is the chairman and the editor-in-chief of Forbes Media, founder of Empower America, and he serves as a FreedomWorks executive board member as well. And I mean, the CV is so long that I could just keep talking about his accomplishments. But we have a lot of ground to cover in the next 15 minutes. Let's get back to it. Mr. Forbes, welcome back to Hurley in the Morning, sir.
Good to be with you, Harry. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And let's start because the main topic of why we have this opportunity with you this morning is because you're relaunching Americans for Hope, Growth, and Opportunity. Remind our listeners about this important, relevant not-for-profit and what's happening.
Well, we've decided to relaunch it because we think the time is right. The public is ready for it, for real pro-growth economic proposals, particularly the flat tax. We've got a presidential election coming up. Candidates are starting to formulate policies. We believe this is the time to put pressure on Congress. They won't react in this session, but we think it lays the groundwork for it. We have a petition online to begin to put pressure out there to get radical tax change, to get this country moving again. And as you know, the country, even though the economy is supposedly getting a little better, we're like a baseball player, still batting 250, 260 when we should be over 300. And people feel it in the lack of rising wages. They feel it in the still subpar participation in the labor markets. They feel it by seeing America falling apart, prestige falling apart overseas, and people want change. So we're focusing on the flat tax, an honest dollar, a stable dollar, gold-backed dollar, and patient control of health care. And we've got an exciting website. We're building it out. We're soon going to have a tax calculator on it. People can find it on ahgo.us. And instead of getting mad, let's get action.
You're listening to Steve Forbes, and you raised a really good point. We talked about it a little bit in the segment right before you with my 25-year official financial advisor to our program, Chuck Malamut, and we talked about the fact that while there has been growth, and even though NASDAQ is 5,000 again for the first time since 2000, the Dow is hitting records, and these things are happening in our financial markets, but there has never been a recovery in American history like this, a deep recession is always followed by robust, fantastic growth, except not this time, Steve. Why?
Because of the things that Washington has done. One is the unstable dollar. Imagine what your life would be like if the number of minutes in the clock changed each day. It would be chaotic. So the unstable dollar is hurt. It's hurt lending to small and new businesses. You have an increasingly horrific tax code. Huge burden on the American people. We're going through a tax season now again. We spend 6 billion hours a year filling out tax forms. So we have this deadweight tax system. And we also have the uncertainty, growing uncertainty from the tens of thousands of pages of regulations with Obamacare. And if you don't know what the rules of the game are, how in the world are you supposed to play? So again, this hurts smaller businesses. They don't have big legal departments to cope with this stuff. So we think there are ways to simplify this thing, starting with the tax code, ways to remove these barriers, because you're right. This is the worst recovery from a sharp downturn in American history.
You're listening to Steve Forbes. He'll be with us until 20 minutes past the hour. We're going to make every minute of it count. Your thoughts, one international question, then I want to talk about the flat tax, because if we had done what you said a number of years ago, we would have had, oh my gosh, we'll get to that in a moment. But obviously the Prime Minister of Israel is here. I'm thrilled that he's here. I think this is a very important speech. I don't care that his reelection is in 2 weeks. It's of no concern to me. This speech, when you have Iran basically having a partnership with this administration, where this administration is saying, and it's at the highest levels, the president, the secretary of state, the official spokesperson for the president, Josh Earnest, and this just absolutely bizarre figure, Marie Harf, all saying that Iran is complying with all nuclear requirements. when we know, Mr. Forbes, we know the Atomic Energy Council, we know the international inspectors, they've all made it clear Iran is not following any rules. How can we be taking this position?
Well, it's bizarre, and it's also extremely dangerous. Iran has not complied with agreements in the past. And if you get a nuclear-armed Iran or an Iran that is allowed to get close to making the bomb, I guarantee you the Saudi Arabians are going to get the bomb, the Egyptians are going to get the bomb, the Turks are going to get the bomb. With that technology floating around, terrorist organizations are eventually going to get that technology. And already Egypt signed an agreement with Russia to develop a nuclear power. We know what that's a subterfuge for. And the idea that Iran can be trusted is preposterous. They've never been trustworthy in the past. And this is not just on Israel. Iran is now developing ballistic missiles, which will reach Israel, reach Europe, and ultimately reach the United States. If you have a nuclear-armed Iran that can deliver nuclear bombs just about anywhere in the world, that's going to make the world an extremely unsafe place. We're going to get a nuclear holocaust at one point or another. Imagine what Iran can do in putting pressure on Europe. They can say to Europe, well, how about allowing Sharia law in Muslim communities? We're already starting to see the rise of that already. So this is dangerous stuff. It's not just about the security of Israel, which is fundamental, but also about ultimately the security of the United States.
And Mr. Forbes, if we take the president at his word in the best light that we can paint this for him, he's willing to allow Iran to have the nuclear bomb within 10 years. How can that possibly be the path that the United States of America would want to charter?
He's in a delusional world. He really believes that if you make nice to these hideous people, eventually they will come around, that America's at fault for everything that's gone wrong in the world. He and a coterie of people believe that. He profoundly believes that. And that therefore Iran can be a strategic partner in his demented mind. I won't say demented, but a mind that doesn't see the world the way most people see it. He thinks we can have a partnership with Iran, a revolutionary regime, terrorist central for the world. He thinks we can work with him. Well, previous administrations on a much lesser scale have tried to work with this regime. It's always been a failure. And this time, the stakes are too high to allow it to go on.
Mr. Forbes, let's talk about your flat tax. It's always been my belief that if the Steve Forbes flat tax had been given the opportunity to take root, the 1980s, the Reagan years, that the greatest peacetime expansion in American history would look small compared to what the coffers would burst overflowing with revenue, because people don't mind paying their fair share. It's when you regressively tax and you do these hideous things that administrations like the Obama administration has done. What would the Steve Forbes flat tax mean for America?
Well, what it would mean is that the American people would have a simplified tax code. You'd have a single rate with generous exemptions for adults and for kids. You could literally do your tax return in a matter of minutes, either on a piece of paper or a few keystrokes on your computer. And with the generous exemptions, you would have, for example, a family of four. Their first $52,000 of wages would be free of federal income tax. $52,000, and you would have only pay 17% above that. You'd have no tax on savings, so you could put together real capital for either starting a business or investing in something, or for your retirement, or for medical needs, setting money aside. You would have no more death tax. I've always believed you should be allowed to leave the world unmolested by the IRS. And on the business side, Harry, we do the same thing. Simplify it. Have exemptions, deductions for the cost of doing your business, 17% rate, and the big kicker there, positive one, would be there'd be no more depreciation schedules for tax purposes. In other words, if you make a capital investment, you write it off in the year in which you lay out the cash, and if you have losses, you put it against future profits. You're right. If you do that with a stable dollar, this country would take off like a roaring rocket.
I don't think there's any doubt about that. And I'll tell you, I hope someday we get the chance to prove it, Mr. Forbes, because it would absolutely deliver the goods. It's not just words. It's like a mathematical equation. It would prove out because it would have to. The numbers, they simply do not lie. Let me ask you about something that I thought was just beyond just hideous yesterday. The president's spokesman, out of nowhere, really, comes up with that the president is, quote, very interested in raising taxes.
Crazy?
Yeah, I knew you know where I'm going before I even say it because you're a genius. He's very interested in raising taxes. Now, he's not going to seek congressional authority and to have a discussion with America that this is good. I mean, well, at least I would like to have that conversation. No, Mr. Steve Forbes. The president is going to, through another one of these executive either actions or memoranda, some fiat, he's going to raise our taxes $100+ billion and have the IRS just do this to us. Is this Deadwood? I mean, what's going on around here?
Well, again, it's their delusional world that they live in. The president, who supposedly was once a constitutional professor in the university, obviously hasn't read the Constitution or completely forgotten it. And he does not have the right to be a dictator. When you win an election in this country, even for the presidency of the United States, you have constraints on your power. That's the way the founders wanted it. They didn't want a dictator elected dictator for every 4 years. And but he feels that he can do this through. They'll find language like, "Oh, we're closing loopholes." They always will find a justification. But the bottom line is, if Congress doesn't do what we want to do, then we're going to do it anyway. And $100 billion tax increase, taking over the Internet, having the IRS go against groups you don't like, having the EPA destroy the energy industry. I mean, have the government regulate the Internet, put taxes and fees and regulate the Internet. If you want to set up a website, you'll ultimately have to register it with the federal government, get permission. I mean, this is bad, wacko stuff.
I was just going to bring up, quote unquote, net neutrality, which hardy har. We know without even seeing these 322 horrific pages. I'm going to believe this.
Secret.
Yeah, that's right. I'm going to believe this Ajit Pai, who's on that board, warning the American people, you're not going to believe. I can't tell you, but you're not going to believe how bad what's in there. Just like Obamacare wasn't about what they said it was, net neutrality is everything that Steve Forbes just said it was, ladies and gentlemen. This is a grab. This is because they see this as something they have no control of, that people can actually speak freely, conduct commerce. This is a disaster, is it not?
It is a total disaster. And I wish we could get away from the real word net neutrality. People hear that and they scratch their heads and say, what's that about?
Oh, yeah.
Let's call it government regulation to suffocate the Internet, to tax the Internet, to tell you what you can and cannot do on the Internet, and setting up sites and the like. No, we have plenty of rules now to prevent bad stuff on the net, go after people who misuse things on the net. We don't need the federal government, Barack Obama, and the people who gave us Obamacare ruining something that's been a great source of progress.
I've always feared, Mr. Forbes, and I told my audience this years in advance, that a second term, but in particular the final 2 years of a second term, would be absolutely beyond our ability to comprehend. President Obama is not disappointing. His reach as 1/3 equal branch of this great country, his reach into doing these things seems to know no boundaries.
Well, sadly, it knows no boundaries. And he just seems to feel if he wins an election, that's it. He should be able to do what he wants for 4 years. And even if he suffers a setback in the midterm elections, it doesn't matter. No sooner did those election returns come in last November than he announced that he was going to have the FCC, a supposedly independent commission, the Federal Communications Commission, go and put in these suffocating rules on the Internet. And so if the election doesn't go his way, he ignores it.
Mr. Forbes, so I keep my word and I get you out on time. Give us a final minute on the relaunching of Americans for Hope, Growth, and Opportunity.
Well, they can go on the site, and we're building it as we go along. It's ahgo.us. They can come on, look through it, hopefully sign the petition, and if they want to help out on a donation, that's good. But we want people to get mobilized, tell their families and friends. We don't have to be just mad anymore. We don't have to be frustrated. We can now do direct action to make a change and set the stage to get America moving again after these next elections.
You do prove every day that you do not have to hold an elected position to be a leader in this country, and you continue, Mr. Steve Forbes, to make a big difference, and it's an honor every time we have the chance to present you.
Well, thank you, Harry, and keep up the good fight.